flying right above us.
Multiple explosions were reported across key military installations, shaking regions far beyond the battlefield. But this wasn't just another skirmish, this was something different. It targeted symbols of Russian power, and the message was loud and clear. It started with an eerie silence around Russia's Engels 2 airbase, a critical hub for its nuclear-capable bombers. Just after midnight, witnesses described a fiery blast that lit up the sky and shattered windows miles away. The airbase used to launch strategic bombers like the Tu-95 and Tu-160C appeared to be ground zero for what may have been a high-precision Ukrainian drone strike. Satellite images later confirmed massive damage to infrastructure, with several runways scarred and what looked like a Tu-bomber engulfed in flames. If confirmed, this would mark one of the boldest hits on Russian strategic assets inside its own territory. Almost simultaneously, explosions rang out in Crimea. Again, the Kerch Strait Bridge, Russia's lifeline to its annexed peninsula, came under attack in the early morning hours. Footage shared online showed smoke billowing from the structure as traffic halted and emergency crews scrambled. Russian officials were quick to blame Ukrainian terrorists, but the pattern of strikes was clear. This was calculated, precise, and symbolic. The bridge, which holds both strategic and political value for the Kremlin, has now been hit multiple times in recent months, each attack further damaging Russia's image of control over Crimea. These back-to-back strikes weren't just physical, they were psychological. They hit places that Russia has long considered untouchable, and the most disturbing part for Moscow, they had little to no warning. Ukrainian officials stayed offering no direct claim of responsibility. But advisors close to President Zelensky hinted that long-range drone capabilities and deep strike planning were evolving fast. According to unconfirmed reports, these drones were launched from Ukrainian-held territory and guided using advanced GPS and satellite tech, avoiding Russian jammers and penetrating far into contested airspace. If true, it suggests a major leap in Ukraine's tactical ability and raises alarms for Russia's homeland security. Meanwhile, in Moscow, people woke up to a rare sight: heightened military checkpoints, air raid sirens echoing from unexpected zones, and defense systems suddenly becoming visible. Even the Kremlin reportedly activated emergency protocols as Russian state media scrambled to control the narrative. The message was clear: nowhere is truly safe anymore. The bigger picture is becoming clearer. Ukraine isn't just defending anymore, it's reshaping the war. By taking the fight to Russian soil and key infrastructures, Ukraine is challenging the myth of Russia's military invincibility. These strikes not only disrupt logistics and troop movements, but also carry symbolic weight. The Kremlin can no longer guarantee security within its own borders, and the psychological warfare, it's just as impactful. Russian citizens, many of whom have ignored or been shielded from the realities of war, are now forced to confront it in their own backyards. A hit on a nuclear-capable airbase and a vital bridge. That sends shivers up the spines of even the most loyal, but this might only be the beginning. As Western support continues and Ukraine sharpens its long-range capabilities, we may be witnessing a shift in momentum. What happens next could redraw the lines, both on the battlefield and in the minds of those watching around the world. As dawn broke, the shockwaves from the attack were still being felt, not just by Russian military leaders, but by civilians waking up to scenes they never expected in peacetime. In Moscow, St. Petersburg, and cities across Crimea, social media was flooded with unfiltered videos, sirens, fireballs, traffic gridlocks, and panicked conversations in the background. But for Russia, these weren't just viral clips, they were a terrifying reminder that the war had leaped over the border. Russia's initial response was typical: downplay, deflect, and control the narrative. State-run outlets described the explosions as minor sabotage attempts, while official statements labeled the drone attacks as unsuccessful or neutralized. But the satellite images and local footage told another story. Buildings were scorched, radar towers destroyed, and there was visible damage to several aircraft shelters. Experts reviewing satellite imagery noticed charred craters and what appeared to be wreckage from a drone that made it deep into Russian airspace, far past most known defense systems. What's worse for the Kremlin is that this is no longer a one-off. Ukraine has been steadily testing Russia's air defense zones for months, but this was the most coordinated, wide-reaching, and symbolic wave of attacks to date. Military analysts believe Ukraine used a combination of long-range drones, likely domestically produced, and possibly NATO intelligence-fed targeting systems. The fact that they hit both a nuclear bomber base and the Crimean Bridge on the same night, that's no coincidence. It's strategic warfare at its sharpest. More importantly, these attacks are redefining modern warfare. Drones that cost tens of thousands of dollars are crippling billion-dollar infrastructure and weaponry. And Russia, despite its advanced S-400 systems and countless air bases, is proving vulnerable in ways few thought possible. That vulnerability doesn't just affect logistics, it shatters the myth of control. And it's not just drones. Some experts believe that Ukraine may now be deploying long-range cruise missile variants or modifying commercial UAVs for precision strikes. With the right software, even civilian drones can be converted into guided weapons. This tech-savvy warfare is leveling the playing field and fast. Now, let's talk strategy. Why target these specific locations? The Engels 2 base isn't just a place for parking bombers, it's a central node in Russia's nuclear deterrent. Destroying aircraft here doesn't just disrupt missions, it sends a political message. We can reach your strongest arm. And the Crimea Bridge, that's Putin's pride project. Built after the illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014, it's both a military supply route and a propaganda symbol. Every time it's struck, Ukraine weakens Russia's grip on the peninsula, its image of dominance. Unsurprisingly, the strikes also triggered emergency military meetings in Moscow. Reports emerged of Putin summoning his top generals in a high-security session to discuss homeland security. Russian social media users even speculated about heightened bunker activity near key government sites. In Sevastopol and Russian authorities initiated partial lockdowns, hinting at potential fears of follow-up attacks. Meanwhile, Ukraine's tone was deliberate but measured. Zelensky's advisors didn't confirm the attacks but made statements about taking the war back to the source. They also warned that until Russia left occupied territories, nowhere will be safe from accountability. It was clear the battlefield has expanded, and Ukraine is no longer afraid to hit Russia where it hurts. Internationally, the response was just as swift. NATO intelligence officers confirmed monitoring the events closely, and while they didn't take credit or assign blame, the silence was telling. Privately, many Western leaders see this as evidence that their investment in Ukrainian defense technology is paying off. By empowering Ukraine with long-range strike capabilities, the West is helping it move from a defensive stance to strategic offense, without putting NATO troops on the ground. But there's risk. Every strike inside Russian territory risks escalation. Russia has already hinted at retaliating beyond the front lines, and has floated veiled threats of using tactical weapons if its sovereignty is compromised. That's why Ukrainian strikes are carefully chosen aimed at military or logistics targets, not civilian zones. Still, the line is thin, and with every hit, the possibility of miscalculation grows. Yet, despite the danger, Ukraine seems undeterred. The war has dragged on for over 2 years, and patience is wearing thin. These strikes represent a new phase, not one of defense, but disruption. Ukraine is no longer just trying to survive, it's now aiming to shake the very foundation of Russia's war machine, and the results they're already showing. Following the strike, operations from Engels 2 were reportedly halted for nearly 48 hours. Railway transport to and from the Crimea Bridge was suspended, forcing Russian forces to reroute supplies through much longer land corridors. Military logistics slowed, and frontline soldiers began reporting shortages of fuel and parts within days of the blast. Symbolically, too, this matters. The more Russia is forced to turn inward to defend its own soil, the less pressure it can apply on Ukraine's eastern and southern fronts. And if Crimea remains isolated and unstable, Russia's plans for a land bridge or permanent military bases begin to fall apart. Of course, the Kremlin won't sit still. Retaliation will come likely in the form of missile barrages or but for Ukraine, the point has been made. The myth of Russian invincibility is crumbling, and with it, the belief that Moscow can strike without consequences. And as ordinary Russians begin to feel the real consequences of this war, blackouts, military deaths, sirens at night, the domestic narrative could shift. Every explosion they hear from their window is a reminder that this isn't a special operation, it's a war. And now, it's on their doorstep. Ukraine's message is loud. If Russia can strike Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Lviv, then Russia must understand that Engels, Belgorod, and Sevastopol are no longer off-limits. The battlefield has changed, and most of all, the balance of power is shifting. The war is no longer confined to trenches and borders. It's becoming a battle of strategy, reach, and resilience. As Ukraine pushes further and Russia reels from strikes once thought impossible, the world is watching a new phase of the war unfold. Will this shift bring resolution or escalation? Subscribe and stay with us as we follow every turning point in this high-stakes conflict.